Good morning, all. As most of you know, we start the planning for the next year's conference at the completion of the previous year's conference. And back in 2016, in the fall of 2016, the ECC board discussed who might be appropriate to kick off the 2017 annual conference with the theme of doing more with less. It was obvious that a prominent representative from the energy sector would be the best choice, and who best to represent the energy sector than ExxonMobil. When looking for a key leader within ExxonMobil, Mr. Liam Mallon was an obvious choice for representing the company and the industry. So Mr. Mallon has been president of ExxonMobil Development Company and ExxonMobil Corporation since January of this year, 2017, and executive vice president since 2014. Mr. Mallon served as vice president of engineering at Exxon Production Company from 2009 to 2012, and vice president of Africa since 2012. He served as operations manager of Mobil Oil Producing Nigeria since 1998, and operations director of ExxonMobil Oil and Gas Operations in Australia since the 2000s. Mr. Mallon serves in many other additional roles within the Exxon and Mobil organization since 1990. Mr. Mallon holds a Bachelor of Science with honors in Mechanical Engineering from Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, and a Master's of Science with honors in Petroleum Engineering from the Harriet Watt University in Edinburgh, Scotland. So without further delay on my part, as a keynote speaker for this year's 2017 ECC conference, I'd like to introduce Mr. Liam Mallon. Hope I got all that right.
I didn't actually realize the bit about the honors, but good morning anyway. Steve, thank you for that kind introduction. So it really is a pleasure for me to be here today, getting to open, I guess, or at least deliver the keynote at this 49th ECC conference. You know, before I start, I do want to add my recognition. You know, when you think about the change here, I'm going to talk about transformative change most of my remarks, but this is already a transformative change. You know, it's 3 months or so, maybe a little bit more ago, that this entire conference had to be postponed. And frankly, when you look around the room, filled to capacity, getting a hotel in Florida in December, and putting on what I'm sure will be an absolutely wonderful event that started already with drama that I think we weren't expecting, and probably has stolen my thunder on innovation and technology before I even start. But a truly remarkable achievement, and I'd like to add my thank you to the organizers and frankly to the hotel for being able to make this happen. And without what you've done, none of us would have this opportunity. So quite incredible what you've pulled off. So thank you. Thank you very much to all of you. It's been mentioned already, but it would be remiss of me a little bit to not also mention it. You know, it's been a challenging year for many in this room, for many of our Gulf Coast residents, for many of our residents here in Florida who suffered damage and loss at the hands of Harvey and Irma. You know, personally, I was in Houston. Luckily for me, not flooded, but within about a half a mile of probably the worst flooding in the whole Houston area. And it was just really somewhat humbling to see the damage and the destruction that was impacted on our city, on our people, on many of our colleagues, and many of our friends. And it's something that I personally will not forget. I've never really lived through something like that, but I will not forget what I saw. But even more importantly for me, you know, what I really won't forget is the resilience and the collaboration that we saw right throughout the entire community during that event. It was absolutely heartwarming. We saw friends helping friends, strangers helping strangers. We even saw the wonderful Cajun Navy. Their boats were parked at the end of our street for many, many days. Just people doing what it takes to help people in need. And really, to me, it just exemplifies that can-do, resilient, collaborative spirit that will make those communities even stronger in the future. And as I thought a little bit about today's remarks, and of course, I have no intention to compare a tragedy like Irma or a tragedy like Harvey, but typically what we've seen in our past is that our industry responds with transformative change coming out of a tough time, or you could call it a crisis of some sort. We all saw the dramatic change in global commodity prices in the last 3 to 4 years. And what we've seen, frankly, since then is an incredible response, an incredible resilience of our industry. We are seeing today transformative change occurring. I'll talk some more about directly where we're seeing that as I go through my talk, but there is no doubt that we are seeing transformative change today. But that transformative change thus far, I would say, has largely been driven by the necessity to survive. All of us in this room have had a tough 3 or 4 years. But we are surviving. We are surviving. We are starting to maintain. But we can't stay in a survive and maintain mode. It's not tenable. A few fundamental reasons for that, in my mind. First and foremost, let's acknowledge it in this room, we are in business to make money. But even more fundamentally, and frankly, much more importantly, the world needs us. Energy demand, by any forecast, whether it's ours at ExxonMobil or any company you choose to look at on the outside, forecasts demand growth in the order of 25% between now and 2040. I want to put that in perspective for you because that's a number that many people use, but what does that really mean? You know, what it really means is that we have to create as much energy again over the next 20-odd years that already exists to power the entire continent of North and South America today. That is a staggering challenge. Coupled with that challenge, we absolutely need to manage the risks associated with climate change. So as I look at that dual challenge of delivering affordable energy to grow the economies that desperately need it around the world, coupled with the significant challenge ahead to manage the risks associated with climate change, and recognize that we are in business to make money, and we are in a period of unprecedented uncertainty, then my hypothesis is, firstly, we're at the early stages of a transformation in our industry, and that transformation needs to accelerate very significantly. And we have that opportunity right in front of us, We need to move beyond this survive and maintain mode. We need to move to the thrive and flourish mode, and that is attainable. You know, it's very apt that the conference theme is doing more with less, because fundamentally, I think the root of the transformation lies in those words. And I'll share with you some of my thoughts specifically of how I think that needs to happen. I would just leave this opening thought with this idea of to be successful, to survive, move to thrive and flourish, we in this room, all of us, we need to think about how do we differentiate ourselves? How can we find more innovative ways to work, more innovative ways to become efficient? So I'd like to start by examining the transformation that is already underway and dwell a little bit on what has caused that transformation and the enormous opportunity that it's providing, whilst at the same time it actually could be perceived as a bit of a threat. Uh-oh. My prompter slides have not moved. There we go. Thank you, guys. Domestic energy revolution. Growing U.S. energy production has spurred a manufacturing renaissance in this country, in particular, right here along the Gulf Coast. It's adding about $20 billion a year to the economy, hundreds of thousands of jobs are being created. When our company, you've heard us discuss growing in the Gulf. Our new chairman announced it in the last 9 months or so. For us, that means a commitment to spend over $20 billion right here in the Gulf Coast over the next 10 years. We will create about 45,000 new jobs, and we will invest across the value chain here in the Gulf Coast, the whole way from the wellhead through the midstream, through chemicals, lubricants, refining, transportation, to participate significantly in this manufacturing renaissance. There are significant investments planned at 11 of our major facilities throughout the Gulf Coast. A very, very material commitment to the economy right here in our country, but also a very significant commitment to enable us and ECC to play a very active role in a very significant opportunity. So what's driving all this? I am sure everybody in this room is well aware of the transformation that has occurred over the last several years, really driven by a technology change back to our innovation concept that unlocked vast potential of previously thought unprofitable or undevelopable resources in the tight oil and tight gas, or shale gas, as many people call it, formations right here in the U.S. This dynamic is creating a so-called era of abundance. It's causing many to think global commodity prices, certainly oil and gas prices, not necessarily the whole value chain, but certainly oil and gas prices will stay in this lower for longer environment. I would say only time will tell. I don't know if it's lower for longer, higher forever. Only time will tell. What I do know is we need to restructure our business so that it doesn't matter. So that it doesn't matter. The other important point that many probably don't fully appreciate is this revolution is in its very early stages. Not just by our estimates, by several external estimates. The U.S. remaining proved reserves of oil and gas now matches that of Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and Russia. That is truly staggering. As a guy who's been in this business my whole career, less than 10 years ago, this country was running out of gas. We built import facilities to import and liquefy gas to distribute it. 10 years, nothing in our business. All those terminals are being turned around, and we are exporting more than double what we did only 5 years ago. It is a staggering transformation, a staggering transformation. And it's only in the very early stages. How is it creating the manufacturing renaissance? Simply said, those facilities who had invested in technology can now take advantage of advantaged feedstock. Businesses are usually made in disruptions. This is a significant price disruption. Those who can take advantage of it, those who are integrated, those who can make the necessary investments throughout this value chain you see behind you, have the opportunity to participate in probably the most significant transformation we've ever seen in our industry. Look at chemicals alone. Exports of chemicals linked to advantaged shale gas feedstocks are projected to reach $123 billion, $123 billion by 2030. Almost all the products that I referred to in Growing the Gulf, almost all will be exported. The technology, the capability, the opportunity exists right here in the Gulf Coast. The demand is the other side of the world. The demand is the other side of the world. What we need to be very aware of is people could move that point closer to the other side of the world, and we lose the opportunity to participate as holistically as we are today, right here in the US. We cannot let that happen. We cannot let that happen. This value chain that you see behind me covers the entire portfolio of value in the energy industry. Starts with the guys in the Bakken and the Permian and the Barnett and all these places. Continues through the midstream, transportation, storage facilities, right here to the Gulf Coast, whether it's chemical plants, integrated chemical refining, lubricant plants, doesn't matter. Blending plants, continues from there through the transportation hubs and takes it the whole way to the end user, predominantly in Asia. This chain is tightly linked. The investments that we are progressing today are the most complex investments we've ever made. They're the most complex things any of you in this room will ever have worked on. So this chain absolutely has to be efficient to stay intact. By definition, it's a chain. Break a piece of the chain, what happens? It's pretty clear what happens. But if we lose a piece of this chain, this whole value concept is at risk of getting broken, and that opportunity is at risk of transferring somewhere else. And that will happen. That is the way the world works. The demand is there, the need is there, somebody is going to meet it. That somebody needs to be the people in this very room. So, that's the business case to make the next transformation. We are in a transformation. I haven't seen a transformation like the one we're in today in my 30-plus year career. I have not seen the change happening at the pace at which it's happening today. But I can tell you it needs to move to the next level. And it's an absolute necessity that we take it to the next level for us to stay competitive. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about what I believe fundamentally are some of the distinguishing capabilities that will drive that next transformation. Everybody in this room, whether you're an owner, contractor, supplier, government, can't remember the fifth category that was introduced, but everybody in this room must think about ways to differentiate yourselves to remain competitive. You know, I always reflect mostly with extreme frustration. Even prior to this so-called era of abundance that we're now in, we all know we made money, but our margins and our profitability was extremely challenged. And it was challenged by cost growth right across our business and mega project delays. I know I suffer daily at the hands of the impact of those two significant things. Our industry, our energy industry, relied on price to sustain profitability. We relied on price to sustain profitability. We absolutely must take price out of the equation. We have to create businesses that can survive in extremely, and thrive in extremely uncertain and unpredictable commodity markets. That is the entire goal within our company. I don't even talk about it anymore. Within a range, of course. There's a floor and there's something else. But the mindset has to be, I can't rely on price to bail me again, because that's what we've done for the last 15 to 20 years. That is what we've done. Shame on us. Shame on us. You know, we really have to relentlessly focus our energy and investment where it counts. As I thought about the themes of your conference, and I thought about what is near and dear to my heart, and what personally we are trying to lead the industry on, there are 4 key areas that I'd like to briefly mention when it comes to these distinguishing capabilities. The first one, a great example of which we saw at the conference opening, is leading innovation. I could have put the word technology. I chose to put the word innovation. Clearly, technology is a fundamental piece of that. Second one is creating a world-class workforce. Third is delivering execution excellence at all of our sites around the world. And lastly, it's completely changing the way we work together to create that true collaborative spirit that we all saw post Harvey and Irma. Doing that in our industry every single day and changing the dynamics of the relationships is fundamental to the next transformation. So let me start with the topic that in our company is near and dear to our heart. We are fundamentally a technology company. So innovation drives our success. This area of innovation, technology innovation, in my view, without a doubt, has the highest potential to disrupt the way we work and create long-term value. Today, despite the drone, despite early uptake, we see very significant variability in our industry on uptake, use, and application. A few facts that most of you probably have heard. Only 1% of the digital data generated in the last 2 years has been analyzed. 1%. The whole area of automation and digital technology, whilst penetrating our industry, is largely untapped in our industry. Think about the construction business. These are not my numbers. ECC can validate them. 35% of construction costs come from material waste and remedial work. 35%. You know, we're about to go execute billion-dollar-plus projects. Nothing is less than $1 billion anymore. Digital technology tools that are available today and being used extensively outside our industry to improve safety monitoring, material tracking, documentation management, design, documentation control. They're available today. Some companies have deeply penetrated and using. Many have not yet started. Many have not yet started. So it's somewhat fascinating, frankly, how far behind our industry is, even relative to other industries in this whole area of digital technology. And within our industry, it is frightening, the variability and how far some are behind even the best in our industry. I wouldn't put ExxonMobil at the top of the class. I'll be very honest with you. We are behind where we need to be, but we will catch up, and we will catch up rapidly. You know, the transformational solutions that innovation can lead to are limitless. I don't think we've even scratched the surface. I've watched with awe what's happened in the last 4 to 5 years, not only in our industry. I talked about that transformational change that happened as a result of technology on shale gas and tight oil, but around the world. You look at the Ubers, you look at the hoteling company, whatever it's called. It doesn't matter, it's happening all around us. But our industry is very slow on the uptake. You know, I think to do this, we need to think about how do we embed this innovative entrepreneurial culture in our companies. You know, we've spent the last 20 years flat out, prior to the last 4, flat out building stuff. Productivity went out the door, innovation went out the door. It was just get it done. So we need to rethink that. We need to rethink that. We need to rebring in innovation, an innovative culture into our companies. The opportunities are limitless. But we also need the workforce capable and skilled to be able to operate in such an environment. I really fundamentally believe the workforce of the future will require new skills and capabilities to succeed. The construction sites of yesterday and even today are not the sites of tomorrow. We all know that. They are not the sites of tomorrow. Productivity is much broader than expecting people to do more. It's much broader than that. In some cases, it's about harnessing the benefits of technology so that people actually have to do much less. And that work can be done in very different ways and very different places. We are seeing a lot of that already today, but still in its early stages. You think about the cloud, you think about automation. Even those things that exist today, allow us to reimagine how we do work. Absolutely allow us to reimagine how we do work. Think about construction techniques to improve productivity, modularization. We at ExxonMobil have championed modularization for several years, in the upstream particularly. We have built complex, integrated modules to improve productivity and lower costs. That is a very, very little adopted technique here in the Gulf Coast. We're going to change that, but it is a very, very minimally adopted technique, and it has the potential to significantly improve efficiency. We need to embrace it. This workforce right here in the US Gulf Coast used to be viewed as the benchmark for productivity around the world. Used to be viewed. No longer. No longer. We had some chit-chat last night around the reception on the reasons for that. There are all sorts of reasons. Heated market, challenge getting the right people, people that can't pass the DNA test. There are hundreds of reasons. But the fact of the matter is, this workforce is no longer the most productive in the world, but it has the most significant opportunity in the world. We have to change that. That's us. We have to lead on this issue. What do we need to do that? We have to invest in quality training and experience. Many of you in this room have made investments in that regard, even without the business proposition behind them. 30% of our construction workforce will be over the age of 60 in the next 10 years. Over the age of 60 in the next 10 years. Not only do we need to retrain, though, we need to rebrand. This industry needs to become an industry that people want to work in again. It's very important that we rebrand our industry. And we collectively, and this is not something anyone in this room can do alone. We all need to embrace it, but collectively, we need to collaborate. All of us influence the factors that affect productivity. And it's crucially important that we spend the time, the money, and the effort on rebranding, retraining, and equipping this workforce for what it will take to be successful in the future. Even with great technology, great tools to improve productivity, we have to execute. We still have to execute in the field. Let me make a few comments on execution. It starts with safety. It requires a well-engineered design, a full systems view of things that seamlessly transitions to the field. Safety here in the Gulf Coast is mixed. I don't think any of us would use a different word. But we have a moral imperative to change that. We have a moral imperative to change that. Only last week in our Beaumont facility, we suffered another fatality. We're still killing people in our industry. Does anyone in this room accept that as a standard? I hope not. But what are we doing to change it? We can't use excuses like 20% of our workforce are felons or whatever. That's not an excuse. If they're going to come on our sites, it's our responsibility as leaders to keep them safe, regardless. We have to empower our people to identify fit-for-purpose design concepts. And we have to stop leveraging the benchmarks of yesterday. That is getting us in trouble. I see it every time when projects are brought to me, and I ask for the reference case. And I get told the reference case is something we did 5 or 10 years ago, and I just said, put that aside. Put that aside. But our mentality for the last 20 years was built on what we did before. So we incrementally improved on what we thought was the best. And the world has fundamentally changed. The world has fundamentally changed. So we need to rethink what is the benchmark and how do we know? How do we know we've created the most efficient concept we possibly can? The last concept I'll talk about is this whole idea of construction-driven engineering. I know you're going to have many panels and discussions on these topics, but this concept is being adapted by some, but needs to be holistically adapted throughout the industry. Bringing the constructor much earlier into the detailed design process, bringing the constructor into the owner's processes. Getting all those ideas up front is a significant change to the way that we've done things in the past, and frankly, to the way we're still doing it in many cases. Technology advancements, productivity improvements, and execution enhancements alone, however, will not yield the transformative change that we need in our industry. It really takes great teams and great teams working together. It's more than peers working together and thinking that's a great team. We have to behave really as an integrated foundational partnership. I have an example on the board. I'm not going to go through it, but it's the Hebron facility. Those of you that don't know it, it's up in off Newfoundland in the North Atlantic. In amongst the most, maybe not the most, but amongst the most severe Arctic conditions on this planet. This is the most complex, largest topsides ever constructed in the world. It sits on top of the most complex, largest concrete gravity structure ever constructed in the world. And this was constructed and integrated in Newfoundland. I don't know if there's any Newfies in the room, so I apologize if I'm going to insult you. I lived up there. It had the worst safety record you can possibly imagine. Those of you who've done work in the construction sites in Newfoundland will know what I'm talking about. This was done 40 million man-hours without one single lost time incident. Without one single lost time incident. An incredible achievement. And it was done, in my mind, because of the strength of the partnership. This was a partnership between ExxonMobil, Fluor, Kiewit, Kverner, Worley, and Wood. Many subcontractors. They were the primes. It was the best partnership I've ever had the pleasure to work with. You will actually hear on the panel from our leader of that. But it was extremely effective. The little picture just shows the tow out. So we spent $13 billion on this thing, by the way. And now we're towing it out from its deepwater site in Newfoundland, 120 miles offshore. Needless to say, there was a few sleepless nights during that tow out. You can imagine if one of those boats tugged the wrong way, what might happen? So it's simply symbolic on us all pulling together in the same direction. This whole one-team approach fundamentally requires us to change the way owners engage contractors, the way contractors engage subcontractors and suppliers. It requires us to rethink that whole model. And again, I think we're doing that today, but it's at its infancy. This whole idea of collaboration, one team, bringing everyone's ideas earlier into the process, ensuring your voices are heard and brought to the table into the concept selection stage is fundamentally a game changer that we absolutely need to embrace. Standardization. We all talk about standardization. Trust me, standardization will not happen holistically. It will not happen holistically until we learn to collaborate and align from the very start. This whole one-team approach is absolutely essential to winning and succeeding and transforming to the next level in this environment in which we find ourselves today. So let me close. It doesn't matter whether we're growing in the Gulf or competing around the world to deliver world-class projects. Each of us in this room, we must take ownership in our path to success. That is my appeal. We must take ownership in our path to success. We will best position ourselves to win, and not just to survive, but to thrive, if we can find ways to thrive in a down cycle. Let's just assume it stays with us for a while. We have to leverage and create those distinguishing capabilities I talked about. We have to disrupt the status quo, just like was done 4 years ago, right here in our backyard. And in doing so, transform life, transform business, and transform the global economy. With the creativity of our people, to achieve the seemingly impossible, we will do the right things. And we will execute better than anyone else. So thank you all very much.
Excellent. Thanks. So we're going to have a kind of a question and answer with Liam for 20 minutes. And the way we're going to facilitate this is we've kind of polled some of the attendees, and I have a series of questions. And Liam, if you'd
Come back.
have some time and join up here, I'll try to get through as many of these as possible. Put you on the hot seat here. So I guess to start with here, I think you piqued a lot of interest in the Growing the Gulf campaign. Is there anything else you might be able to add to that might be informative to the group here?
Sure. Thank you, Steve. I think we've talked a little bit about it in some detail, but the genesis was really what I talked about. The genesis is the transformation that we're in today in our industry. And it is primarily driven by, frankly, a couple of things. The significant opportunity to take advantage feedstocks, primarily shale gas, but also tight oil, and the fact that our company invested significant amount of money in the right technology in our refineries and in our chemical plants to be able to convert that advantage feedstock, whether it's tight oil or shale gas, into very high-end products that are still attracting significant prices. And again, it's for an export market. So that whole business model is driven by that value chain connection. The investments span all of our facilities from Beaumont, Baton Rouge, Baytown, a new LNG plant in Sabine Pass here, and of course significant investments in the upstream to get that product to where it needs to be. So we're very excited about it, Steve. It's real. Many of those projects are already underway. Some are waiting the final investment decision, but we expect to make those here in the next year or two. So
fantastic. So you had talked about the one team approach. So how can the industry, I guess, adopt some of those techniques, whether it's supporting your campaign or just other capital projects throughout the world?
Yeah, good question. The whole one team approach is, to me, as I said, fundamental to our success. And it's more than just creating integrated teams. It starts with a different discussion right up front around contracting strategy. And it really requires us to think quite differently about that contracting strategy. And it starts with a discussion of risk. Who is willing to take what risk? And in that discussion, those risks need to be clear. And I don't want people taking risks that are not theirs to take. For example, I always take the subsurface risk. I will always have to take that. I can't pass that on to somebody in this room. So I think it's a risk management discussion up front. It's an intent to partnership, and then it's an intent not to duplicate capability. And it's all built on trust, Steve. You have to establish the trust right up front. And that takes, first of all, it takes a relationship. It's hard to have trust without a relationship. But it takes time to build that trust and demonstrate capability. But when you get it, the outcomes are just phenomenal. So I would say it's relationship driven. It's early engagement driven. It's understanding unique and differentiating capabilities and making sure that we don't duplicate those. And it's frankly having difficult discussions with the owners. I mean, this is about the owners changing maybe more so than it is the contractors and suppliers. And you have to push us to change. We don't like to change. We like to do things the way we've always done it. Yep. That has to stop.
So you mentioned in one of the 4 items that you laid out in your talk, people, the resources side, and if you look at our industry, you mentioned some of the demographics, age, and the issues that we've dealt with for several years and years to come? Or how do we retain the resources that we have, human resources, in the industry, and how do we attract the next generation? So what techniques or processes or what do we need to do to build that capability back up within the industry, from your perspective?
Well,
It's an easy question.
yeah, I mean, I do think it's first of all, you have to start with the basic investment. You have to invest in training, and obviously you have to invest in providing people with the right work experiences. And again, that's been very challenging. As we've gone through the last 4 years, for many in the survive mode, cut to the bone, providing those opportunities was a challenge. I mean, we understand that. I'm very empathetic to that problem. But we can't stay there, right? We all know that our hiring has been brought to a minimum. We all know that the skills need to be upgraded. So I think it is, Steve, as straightforward, and some in the room have done this. They have made significant investments in training facilities and in creating work experiences for people. And then I think it's bringing in this innovative culture and creating the right focus within your company on how are you going to equip those folks for the future. And an old crusty construction guy grabbed me the other day when we were talking about the subject of innovation and technology, and he said, the first thing you need to do, he said, is make sure that whenever you talk or wherever you go, you got a 30-year-old right behind you who knows how to do this stuff. We have a whole generation that we've hired in the last 5 to 10 years who fully embrace what I'm talking about. They just haven't necessarily been allowed to go do it. So, and it's not an easy problem. I mean, this is a very difficult problem. How do you unlock that potential that probably exists today within your organizations? It most likely exists, but we probably got them doing the same old stuff. So, it's something that we are wrestling with. The basics are the basics. Doing that is very challenging, but we have to stay committed to doing it.
Yeah. So Rachel mentioned that later on today we'll have a panel, universities and what their role is in this. How do you see the role of, whether it be universities or even schooling before that, for the skilled labor? Where do you see that fitting into the whole puzzle?
Well, I think they play a significant role, Steve, and certainly for us, we are in that process of advocating for change in the curriculums, right from, we as ExxonMobil, as you know, actively support the STEM program throughout the U.S. So I mean, we are very active the whole way along that chain, but it does require significant change. I mean, I don't think the universities are fully equipped today to take the kids through the programs that they're going to need to be most successful in the future. So we're supplementing that now by creating those at the inlet to their careers. But we want to bring that further back. That's going to take a long time. But I think you have to work all of these things. I mean, it's not just one piece.
Yeah.
And it's a big challenge.
And I'll shift the discussion here to our friend on the stage. If you look at the newer technologies and innovation and so on, it seems as though our industry, it takes a long time for us to accept and to implement newer technologies. Why do you think that is, and what do we need to do? You mentioned it's a big part of the future. How do we, whether it's risk or the fear of the unknown or whatever it happens to be, it just seems like we're late to the game. How do we deal with that?
Well, I think this survive coming out of a very tough few years, I frankly think has engendered and driven a change. So I think we are, I use the word untapped to be somewhat dramatic. I think we are starting to see a noticeable shift, but we are way behind. I mean, this is not my opinion. We have had a number of consultants working with us, and there's no doubt our industry is significantly behind. There are others that are way more advanced compared to what we are. I think, Steve, at the heart of it, You know, we spent the last 20 years prior to 2014 in a boom cycle. And I mentioned the consequence of that boom cycle. But I really think we were so focused on just getting it done. I mean, in our company alone, you know, frankly, we had more to do than we could possibly do. You know, we were spending $20 billion a year on major project activity. Today we're spending $5. You know, so that gives you the opportunity to retool, reskill, retool, and look, frankly. I mean, we didn't have time to breathe, never mind really look outside. And truthfully, in a world where oil was $120 and $150, I think we became lazy in terms of innovation and adoption. We had a huge portfolio, the industry had a huge portfolio of opportunities that they needed to work off to create the value. And in a world of higher for longer, you didn't need to be as innovative. I'm not saying that there wasn't innovation in the projects. There was huge innovation in the projects, but not so much in the digital realm. Not so much. And I think there was this fear of doing new things. But today, you know, we're seeing companies who are in businesses that take as much risk as we do, aviation, nuclear, manufacturing, who are adopting this technology very aggressively. So I think it's coming. I think everywhere we look, and I'm certain in every one of the companies that you run around this room, you are actively pursuing opportunities to do more with less from a technology perspective. But the opportunity space is evolving every day, and we are at the bottom end of the opportunity space. Again, you know, it's like everything else. It starts with a commitment and a recognition at the very top. And once that commitment and recognition is there, it's go get it. And we're very good at that. Our industry is the best on this planet at once it sees something, going and getting it. So I'm confident this will happen. But I think it was frankly that whole environment of go, 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 boom or bust, make as much as we can, and then we'll worry about it.
Yeah. So when you think about the shale boom, you know, the game changer and so on, it's kind of a tough question, but do you look at it as a net positive, or is there more challenges than it's worth on the positive side?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Steve. I mean, it's brought some pain for many. There's no doubt about it. Many of you in the room have seen the headline numbers, but I mean, in the early days, there were hundreds of thousands of people laid off around the world. I think Houston alone, well over 100,000 people. So, and many companies didn't survive, as you know. Many did, but many did not. So there's no doubt that the early pain was significant, but the resilience and the collaborative spirit kicked in. And in most cases, many companies have learned to thrive. And you know, most companies have brought their break-even costs down 30 to 40%. So it is enabling a continued revolution. Of course, the negative of that is, does that keep us in this lower for longer environment? And while that creates manufacturing renaissance opportunities, ultimately it puts pressure on, can we sustain that? I think, frankly, only the future will tell, Steve. You know, there are many factors that could influence that. You know, global policies, the role of OPEC, geopolitical events. You know, again, my message to the room is, don't get too focused on that. Create a business that will thrive even in a lower for longer cycle, because that's really what we have to do. And I can tell you, that's what my company is absolutely intent on doing. You know, in the broader perspective, lower energy, more affordable energy is very good for the world. So it's a dichotomy. You know, on the one hand, it's tough, and that's why we need to transform. But for the broader economy and for the vast majority of people, more affordable energy is the best possible thing we can do. So I'm in the net positive mode. Would I like higher prices? Of course, but I'm in the net positive.
Yeah, yeah. I know we're kind of wrapping up here. For the last couple minutes, is there anything that, I mean, you've given us a lot of food for thought. Anything else you'd like to identify to the audience?
No, I think, Steve, just let me reiterate my thanks for the opportunity. You know, this is the most exciting business on the planet. There's no doubt in my mind that we need to rebrand ourselves to continue to attract the best people on the planet, but we have the best people on the planet. You know, we need to unleash those people. You know, we've gone through a period of being extremely constrained in our processes, in the way we ask people to work, and we need to unlock that. Mm-hmm. The potential is absolutely enormous. You know, get on the technology bandwagon, do all the things that I talked about from a distinguishing capabilities viewpoint, and really think about what is it that differentiates you. Everyone in this room has to face up to that challenge. You know, if we're all the same, we're all the same. We don't get better. Competition is what drives improvement. Competition is what drives innovation. So I think people embracing that idea, to be successful, they have to differentiate themselves, and we will all win.
Just like to thank you for your insightful comments, and a round of applause from the audience. And thanks. We do have a gift for you. Thanks, Rachel. And on behalf of the ECC, I'd like to offer you
Thank you.
a nice gift and appreciation. Thanks again.
Thank you.